The January transfer window is officially underway, and there hasn't been much movement, so I figured I'd look at every Premier League side and provide you with a realistic transfer target that might end up signing for your club this January. Yes, the January transfer window is full of shocks, full of twists and turns and surprises. I'm going to try my best to provide you with some context for where your team might be heading. Maybe they don't sign this player, but they'll probably look in this specific area of the pitch if I were to assume. As always, if you end up enjoying, consider giving the video a like, subscribe if you're new, and comment down below who do you want your club to sign this January transfer window. Let's get straight into things with Arsenal. Arsenal's for me is fairly obvious. And just as a preface, I did not repeat any players in this list because I felt like that'd just be a little like cheating. So right off the bat, Arsenal, Ivan Toney. Ivan Toney, I don't know if he's the perfect striker for Arsenal. I don't know if he encompasses everything that they need. And surely, I mean, I can't be the only one that thinks 6 to 8 months away from the game, you're probably going to come back a little rusty. Let's be real. And all that said, I think Ivan Toney fits the bill of what Arsenal should want out of their next striker signing. Their next offensive signing should be a pure number 9, much in the way that Ivan Toney is, who could just bury the ball, who can, if he needs to, link up with your wingers and your midfielders, obviously, but he should be a proper target man, realistically. I know Toney has a bit more than just being, let's say, just someone who chills in the box and finishes challenges, but for what he's worth, he would provide Arsenal with a lot of depth going forward. He would really switch things around in terms of how they attack. They become much more direct. They'd be a lot more, scary going forward, I'd say. I think defenses would be a little more kind of prone to making an error, almost just by the fact that having Martinelli, Toney, and Saka through the front would be, quite frankly, devastating. So for Arsenal, definitely they should go out and sign Ivan Toney. It won't be cheap, but it will be worth it. Next up is Aston Villa. In Aston Villa, there's not a lot in the way of many rumors. There's a few clubs where the rumors are kind of either just like unrealistic or they just aren't there. So I'll preface that for any side that does have any issues with that. But for Aston Villa, I went for this player, Cyril Ngonge from Hellas Verona. I hope I pronounced that right. But Ngonge, he plays for Hellas Verona. He's got a few goal contributions, I believe 5 goals and assists or so in total. He's heavily linked to Aston Villa right now. You would assume that they will get some other signings as well beyond this player, but this is the most realistic, I think. He plays, I believe, on the right wing, so he would play in place of, say, Bailey or Moussa Diaby, should one of them move, or should, say, need for rotation come up, he could definitely fill in those gaps. He's pretty young at, like, I believe 22 years old, so definitely a solid signing if this goes through. Some other names that are linked, Marcos Acuna, even though they have Lucas Digne, who's been playing very well, let's say. But at the same time, they need some more cover on those fullback spots. Left back and right back are very important, regardless of what competition you're playing in, what league you're playing in. And, that former relationship with Acuna maybe it manifests into a transfer to Aston Villa. But for now, my pick is Cyril Ngonge from Hellas Verona, the winger. And next up, we have Bournemouth, another side who not a lot of incoming transfer rumors, but there was one that kind of caught my eye, and it's a player from Leicester City who's fallen out of favor a bit, hasn't really started. And honestly, I think he would provide them, maybe he's not someone who starts ahead of Solanke, but he'd be somebody who you throw on for the last 15, 20 minutes maybe if Solanke needs a rest, and you just leave opposition backlines with a bit more to worry about. That player is Patson Daka. Patson Daka, he's a bit one note, let's say. Some people might say that he's just a pace merchant or this and that. Sometimes you need that, Sometimes you need that kind of pure, direct energy going forward. And honestly, all things considered, if he can get them, 4 or 5 goals throughout the season and a couple contributions with assists, then you're looking at a signing that could be well worth it, in the fact that, Bournemouth, they're going to really need everyone to pick up some slack and really push forward. I don't think they're getting relegated, but obviously, like any side, you look to build upon each result and hopefully finish as high up in the table. And I think Potts and Daka would help them a lot. Being that he's not featuring for Leicester City, you can imagine a cut price, maybe 10 mil could get him or something like that, maybe less. But yeah, moving forward with Brentford, another player who is really heavily linked to Brentford, Asane Diao. Asane Diao currently playing for Real Betis. He's got 5 goals and 2 assists in 17 matches. Not a bad output whatsoever. He's early 20s, I believe 21 or 22. And honestly, Brentford needs some firepower, especially if they end up selling Ivan Toney. You need somebody on that left-hand side. I know Yona Wissa plays there, but he, quite frankly, I don't think is good enough to carry you week in, week out if you don't have someone like Toney. If you do, maybe, but you need some more depth. You need some more versatility. And, this kid's young. Even if they get relegated, he'll be a good asset for them. So, Asane Diao, that's my pick for Brentford. Moving forward with Brighton, and this is a player who is heavily linked to Brighton, heavily linked to a number of clubs around Europe, and is honestly a player who I think could really help Brighton elevate that back line, who is known to concede a bit of goals. They haven't been as tidy as last season, and I think the signing of Strahinja Pavlovic from RB Salzburg would be a wonderful signing. He's linked to Roma, he's linked to Juve, he's linked to Fenerbahce, but Brighton have a lot to offer. They're in the Premier League, they're still in European competitions. He's a player who honestly is very impressive for his height, to be so good at passing, to be such a rock at the back. Him and Lewis Dunk would be frightening to come up against. They still have some issues in goal, in my opinion, Brighton, to really be able to take it to the next level. They haven't had a real goalie that's, there and you're like, this guy's going to stop any shot coming in. He's just going to be a rock at the back and he's going to save you points. But adding someone like Pavlovic could really change things around for Brighton. Moving forward with Burnley, Burnley need a lot to be done around this squad. They need a lot of investment. All the relegation sides really need several transfers, one would assume, but that probably won't happen for all of them. And for Burnley, I went with Crescencio Somerville, a bit of an expensive signing. Leeds has put a 30 mil price tag on him. And last season, he scored against Liverpool. And that was my first exposure to Crescencio Somerville. But since then, he had some decent performances, and now he's tearing it up with the 3rd most goal contributions in the championship, around 18, I believe, goals and assists, which is quite frankly phenomenal for someone of his age and profile who's just kind of growing and coming into the scene. He could provide them with a lot of explosiveness on the wings, some, good creative spark. He could excite the fans, maybe even lift the spirits of some of his teammates, and I think he'd slot right in, especially with that kind of fluid style of play that Company is trying to play. He could honestly be a perfect player for the here and now and just for the future, especially if they end up staying up, which I don't think they will do this season. But moving forward to Chelsea, and this one for Chelsea, some people might be like, this is unrealistic. This won't happen. It's Victor Osimhen. And listen, I know Chelsea spent a ton of money. I know that they probably deserve some sort of FFP violation because they're spending like the, fraction of a small nation state's annual revenue on each transfer window. I get that they're spending like crazy, but 130 mil release clause for Victor Osimhen, while it does seem, let's say, what's the word I'm looking for? It might seem a bit, much. I think that's a fair value for someone like Osimhen. I think he's a quality striker, and he'll tear it up anywhere. He's a revolutionary striker at that, and will basically elevate any side that he comes into. I would love to have him at Liverpool, and either way, I do think he's going to end up at Chelsea. I think he's going to get that move either in January or in the summer, but with the way that Todd Bowley's been moving outside of football, let's say in the MLB with the Dodgers, we look at how he's been operating there, could probably expect him to operate similarly in the January transfer window. And for me, him signing Shohei Ohtani to a 700 mil contract, over 10 years, and then getting him to defer that contract to an annual payment of 2 mil and then receiving the final payments at the end of the contract, that shows that Todd Bowley, realistically, as much as you might hate or love him, and I hate him for sure, even though I love what he's doing to Chelsea and kind of ruining him, he's probably going to want to make a big statement signing this January. And I think Victor Osimhen ticks all the boxes. They need that number 9. They've been really lacking it. They're fairly okay in other areas of the pitch, and there's, still holes, but you could understand the need to kind of put those other holes to the side if you're able to bring in a player of Victor Osimhen's caliber, because he is such a good striker. He would make Chelsea instant threats against anyone they came up against. I mean, Nkunku, Palmer, Osimhen, those 3 alone would strike fear into any Premier League backline's hearts, and I think he'd be a wonderful signing even at the 130 mil. Crystal Palace. This answer might be a little like, wow, really? Like, that's who you're going with? But hear me out. Teden Mengi from Crystal Palace, or from Luton, I should say, linked to Crystal Palace, currently playing obviously for Luton, has been playing wonderful for Luton. If you haven't been seeing how well he's been playing, it's, if you're not watching Luton week in, week out, which honestly I'm not, he is a killer right now. He is a rock at the back for them. Rarely ever puts in a wrong foot. And this is an interesting stat to kind of keep in your mind for him specifically, and why Crystal Palace might want him. He has the highest percentage of defensive duel success rate among any defender under 21 years old in Europe's top 5 leagues. That is a wonderful stat for him, like an unbelievable stat. So credit to Teden Mengi for an incredible season. With Mark Gahey probably leaving within the next year or two, you'll look to get somebody in who could kind of A, fill in that, defensive spot, but B, being that he's an under 21-year-old England international, I don't think he's really featured for them, but he would play for England in that case. He would be just a killer. He would be so good for them, and he would fit just right in, I think. And Everton, don't take this the wrong way, Everton fans. I've looked into it, and there's not a lot of indication that Everton's going to invest a lot this window. And if they do invest, it's going to be, quite frankly, just some loan deals or maybe some free transfers. So for that, the only one I really see, the only rumor that's floating around there that actually has some water maybe and has some weight to it, or can hold some water and has some weight to it, is Jesse Lingard. And Lingard, I mean, if you've been watching the Premier League for a few seasons now, you'll even just like a couple, you'll know who he is. You'll know what he provides. Is it a good move? No, but there's not a lot of other moves on the table for Everton. They have to kind of be careful after those FFP charges have been levied against them. They've eaten them like champs, but now they have to invest properly in the window. I don't know if Jesse Lingard's the right way forward, but being that he's the only one I could find, and I really did try to find other players other than Jesse Lingard, because believe me, that's kind of a lame inclusion, I know. Lingard, maybe if he gets him a goal or an assist or two off a free signing, you take that, if you get him in on a free. Moving forward to Fulham. Fulham set to lose Joao Palhinha most likely. Palhinha was set to sign for Bayern last summer. He didn't. They ran out of time. So he's been playing at Fulham ever since. And I mean, it's probably for the best for Fulham because, they would have been without both Mitrovic and Palhinha. They'd probably be further down the table if we were to extrapolate those kind of losses throughout the course of the season. The player I've gone for is Andre Trindade. And the reason I think that Fulham will sign Andre Trindade is because A, Liverpool has kind of left that to the side. Who knows if they'll ever revisit that possibility in the future, but they're not in form anymore. Arsenal were as well, but they're not necessarily as much in form anymore. And as a result, I mean, Fulham's interest remains, and, a move to the Premier League. He just won the Copa Libertadores with Fluminense and was in the Club World Cup. I mean, he'd be a wonderful signing. I've seen him play a lot in highlights and have followed him probably 4 months now or so. kind of like in and out, hoping that, maybe Liverpool makes a move, but it looks like he's probably going to go to Fulham if I were to have to guess. So for him to go there, honestly, he'd be a wonderful, wonderful acquisition. He looks like a really top signing. He really reminds me of an old school kind of Fernandinho type of center defensive mid who can defend, who can kick the ball around when he needs to. He's got a bit more range and technical flair, I'd say, than Fernandinho, and maybe he's not necessarily like a player that'll go and play center back, but him in that kind of full midfield could be honestly just what they need to replace Polina. Now, for Liverpool, I'm a Liverpool fan, so this inclusion probably means a lot to me. And I've looked around, and there's obviously options, right? People will say, oh, you need to invest defensively, or you need to, Anthony Robinson was linked. We're not getting him. But for me, as much as Liverpool do need to invest possibly in another center back or a right back, Liverpool loves to have a surprise winger signing in the January transfer window. And because of that, and with the fact that Mohamed Salah is gone for the African Cup of Nations, I think they will sign another just shock winger. And that player for me is Johan Bakayoko from PSV, 20 years old, 4 goals, 13 assists in 27 27 matches. Honestly, he's such a frighteningly good player. Belgian international. He was linked in the summer. It didn't go through. He was linked to Brentford in the summer. It didn't go through as well. He's been tearing it up with PSV. PSV are absolutely dominating and mollywopping their whole league. They're just crushing it. This move would probably cost a lot, being that it's middle of the season, but Eredivisie clubs really, they can't, compete with the likes of other clubs in terms of being able to set like an astronomical price tag to keep a player away from signing. If he were to sign for Liverpool, I probably expected to go for like 35, 40, maybe 45 mil. And that feels like, a generally fair price, but also like a range that Liverpool likes to work within. I think he'd be fantastic. If he gets thrown in the squad, then Liverpool has really a ton of depth across that whole front line. And even without Salah, you could have, Bakayoko, Nunez, Diaz, or have Gakpo, Jota, Bakayoko, maybe even Elliott at right wing. So I think he'd be a class signing. I think he'd provide a lot of depth. He has been linked quite a bit. There's other defensive players like Maxence Lacroix who's been linked. I would love another defender possibly, but quite frankly, I don't know if Liverpool is going to go in for a defender because the only ones that are linked were Robinson and Lacroix. And besides that, it's just been weird links like Olise and Bakayoko. But I really rate Bakayoko, and I'd love to see him sign for Liverpool. So that's my pick for Liverpool on this list. Next up is Luton Town. Luton Town, honestly, in my eyes, they need a goal scorer. And while they can't really go out and sign somebody who's, established in the Premier League at the moment, there's not many players that I think would just up and go to Luton. I think someone that is an honorable mention for this spot would be someone like Teemu Pukki. There's another player, Gabriel Sara, who is a 24-year-old CDM who plays for Norwich. He's got 5 goals and 8 assists from defensive mid. So maybe even him, providing some defensive cover, but also providing some, forward momentum to maybe, sit behind Ross Barkley and stuff and give him more license to roam. That could be really beneficial for them too. But my pick, being that they have to work within financial kind of constraints, being that they're, a relatively small club, or the smallest club in the Premier League at that too, I would go for Plymouth Argyle's Morgan Whitaker. Morgan Whitaker's got 13 goals and 5 assists, 26 appearances. He's 22 years old, 6 foot. He's kind of the opposite of an established player, like Teemu Pukki that they would go out and get, or maybe like someone like Kiefer Moore or Chris Wood. But he's a very exciting player. He could get you a ton of goals. He could, him and Adebayo up top could be a nice partnership. He plays more as like a right winger, but he has played up top as a striker as well. So if you kind of have him on the right, Adebayo on the left, Bene off the right as well, that, that front line would be kind of scary, low key. If you had a Bene on, say, the left wing, and you had Whitaker on the right, and then you had Adebayo through the middle, that could be pretty, pretty good. That could help them really in that push to stay up a lot because you'd have a lot of versatility in your front line and you'd have a lot of forwards that honestly play, frankly, quite differently, I would imagine. And yeah, that could be great for Luton. So moving forward to Manchester City. In Manchester City, they did sign an Argentine kind of starlet from, I believe it was River Plate, and then just loaned him back out. I think they loaned him out at least. If he starts featuring, I'm going to feel like a real Muppet. But besides that player, the one player I could see City really going for, like going out of their way to sign this January, Joshua Kimmich. Kimmich, he's not necessarily featuring constantly for Bayern. He's winding down his contract as well. He's 28 or 29. He could maybe look to get one last big move in there before he's looking at going to another club to retire at. And I don't see why City wouldn't be that club. I mean, he played under Pep Guardiola before, and I think he would slot right in, especially if Rodri is out with injury or suspension. You would want somebody like Kimmich to come in, provide that cover, and you'd basically, it'd be negligible that you're losing Rodri. But if you still have Rodri there, I mean Rodri and Kimmich, and then you have, say, De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva, oh my god, like that midfield would actually be frightening, and he could be honestly a fantastic, not like replacement, but it would be a pretty solid move, I think, to fill that gap that was left in the squad by Ilkay Gundogan's departure to Barcelona in the summer. Next is Manchester United, and Sir Jim Ratcliffe officially has the sporting control and sporting operations under wraps for Man United. He's under control of that. He doesn't own the club, but he is going to want to make a big impact in January. And my guess is this big link that's seemingly not dying down for some reason. Michael Olise to Manchester United. There is other players linked. There's always players now getting... players will always be linked to United. But Olise feels like the one that I could see happening. Antony's been a straight-up flop. He's been one of the worst signings, if not the worst signing of the Premier League era. And you look at, like, even Harry Maguire. He got a lot of slack for signing for Man United. But has he been as bad of a signing as Antony? I think not. Antony, entrenched in drama off the pitch. No end product on the pitch. Fidget spinner. That's really all he's amounted to. Being called a fidget spinner. Cost 70 mil. And while Olise would probably cost a lot too, at least Olise can do it in the Premier League. At least Olise provides you with some difference going forward. At least he is a bit more put together than someone like Antony. And if Antony stays with the club still, you could have him off the bench and that'd be fine, I guess. But Olise is definitely a superior player. So in my eyes, I mean, if they go for this move, go for it. I think it'd be a solid signing. It would cost them a lot, but I think it'd be honestly a interesting signing for their end. Next up is Newcastle, and Newcastle also have a lot of areas of concern, a lot of places that they need to invest because of this injury crisis, but they can't overspend and they need to be a little shrewd. So I have two players, but I'm going to say that they're going to get Calvin Phillips because Calvin Phillips feels like the bigger of the two holes that they need to fill long term. I don't think they'll get him on a permanent deal. I think they'll loan him in. But the other one was David De Gea. David De Gea, while he could be great, I could also see Newcastle just kind of being like, well, Dubravka did good, and we still have Karius, and Karius, maybe he impresses if he has to come off. We'll just wait for Pope to get back, and we'll give Dubravka the reins for now and give him the keys. I think Calvin Phillips will sign for them. David De Gea, a little less likely, but could still happen. So I'm going with Calvin Phillips for Newcastle. Next up is Nottingham Forest, and I think they're going to sign this center back from Fluminense, Nino, teammate of Andre Trindade. Nino was fantastic in the Club World Cup. He's fantastic in the Copa Libertadores. And, he's 26 years old. He has that solid profile for Nottingham Forest, like experience, but still has some mileage left in the tank, someone that you could probably bring into that back line, and hopefully he shores it up a bit more for you. That could be really what they'd want, honestly. They got some good players across the pitch. Alanga, Morgan Gibbs-White, Taiwo Awoniyi, just lots of depth, realistically. throughout certain areas of the pitch. Defensively, though, at center back, it does feel like there is a bit of a hole there. And I think Nino would be fantastic for them. I think he's left-footed as well, so that could provide them with even more versatility at that back line. So yeah, I'm going to go with Nino from Fluminense for Forest. Next up is Sheffield United, and this is a move that is almost nailed on. I'd be shocked if it didn't happen. Ben Brereton Diaz, the former England, I believe, international who turned Chilean international. Ben Brereton Diaz, he signed for Villarreal in the summer. He's been awful since signing for them this summer. He's been just kind of meme ever since signing. And I think a move to Sheffield United could be exactly what he needs. Go play in a system where realistically you're going to be the main man scoring goals up top for Chris Wilder. It'd be him and Cameron Archer, two players who are, fairly okay, fairly average as far as Premier League standards go. But for a side like Sheffield, they could both get you, a handful of goals and maybe, turn things around at the club. I think Brereton Diaz is really, really close to making this move too, so it wouldn't surprise me if within the next week to week and a half or so he ends up signing. Next is Spurs, another hugely, hugely nailed on transfer. Radu Dragushin from Genoa. This center back, he could play as a left back, he plays a right back, he's very versatile. There was rumors that Spurs wanted Joe Gomez. That was never going to happen. Let's be real here. But it makes sense that this guy signing now is going through because you look at this guy and the fact that he could play anywhere in the back line shows that Ange Postecoglou is really looking for somebody who's versatile, kind of like a Swiss Army knife defender. And that is exactly what Dragoshin is. He's pretty young too. I forget his age exactly, but I don't think no older than 24. So as far as signings go, I think he could be a player who, provides them with, some versatility, some solidity at the back, especially with Van de Ven out. Romero's there too, but, I think instead of having someone like, Dyer getting ready to warm up and be that kind of player and that backup, you would much rather want someone like Dragoshin, who's a bit more versatile and overall probably a better defender. Moving forward to West Ham. And for West Ham, we have another Genoa player, back-to-back Genoa players. Kind of a interesting thing there, but didn't really plan this whatsoever. But Morten Frendrup is the player that I'm going to say West Ham might sign. West Ham are fairly tight-lipped right now as it goes for transfer rumors and all the sorts. But Morten Frendrup is a player who can play a number of positions. He can play as a holding mid, he can play as a left back, he plays center back, play a bit further, more as an 8. He's really a player that I think West Ham would really love to get. And he's also a player that I think would fit right into a David Moyes system of being kind of like a grafting, kind of hardworking, robust midfielder and just utility player. I think he'd be fantastic. Liverpool is also linked, but I don't think he'll sign for Liverpool. He seems like an interesting prospect, so if he does sign for Liverpool, I wouldn't mind it. But I'm going to go with Morten Frendrup for West Ham United. And finally, the last spot in the list, Wolverhampton Wanderers. Wolves, who will they sign? And honestly, the name I keep seeing is Hugo Ekitike from PSG. Ekitike hasn't really featured a ton at PSG this season. Mbappe's tearing it up. They have Dembele, they have Colomwani, they have Gonçalo Ramos. They have a lot of forwards right now at PSG. Bradley Barcola, Xavi Simons coming at the end of the season as well once his loan is over with RB Leipzig. And I mean, let's be real. You need to move sometimes. And while Wolves might be a kind of weird move for someone to go to after PSG, I think it'd be a fantastic move for Hugo Ekitike. Wolves have some fantastic players right now offensively. They have Hwang Ki-chan, who's playing out of his skin. They have Pedro Neto, who, he's injured and in and out and linked with Man City and Arsenal even. But he's getting a lot of assists. And even still, they probably need more firepower. Even if they replace only one of them, say Pedro Neto leaves this January or something, then Hugo Ekitike absolutely should go through. He's heavily, heavily linked. And even if they keep their whole squad, just still get him because he's such a young, promising player that could play off of Mateus Cunha really well, could play in place of him. I think he'd be a wonderful addition to their squad, and Gary O'Neill would probably love to get him. So those are my picks for every single club in the Premier League, going through them and kind of giving my opinions as to who they might sign realistically this January transfer window. As always, if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing, like as well, and comment down below, who do you want your club to sign this January transfer window? Thank you so much for making it this far in the video. If you enjoyed it, and if you made it this far, genuinely appreciate it. I'm Sideline Sedo. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.